Welcome to Very Big Ventures, where bold ideas and the people behind them take center stage. Because very big ventures don't start big. They start with a spark, a frustration, a moment when someone decides this matters. From personal dreams to entrepreneurial leaps, to reluctant leaders who never planned to build something big. Every journey begins small, but the journey changes the person. And we are here to explore it. My name is Taja Adhav, the founder of Leases, and I'm fascinated by the moment when someone decides to build something bigger than themselves. And on this show, we go beyond the headlines, into the doubt, the risk, the turning points, and the very big visions that are still unfolding. This is Very Big Ventures. So let's begin. Today's guest has over 35 years of restaurant leadership, opening and developing over 100 restaurants and multiple acquisitions. He operates 39 Jack in the Boxes, 7 Jimmy John's, 62 Arby's locations, and he's a mentor as well. So I think you'll really enjoy hearing what he has to say as a strategist. He's great at team development and high performance management. Please welcome Steve Wozni. Steve.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely, Steve. Well, listen, for our guests who don't know the Steve Wozni that we're about to unpack, why don't you share your origin story? Go back as far as you'd like, as to kind of how you got into the business and your why.
Yeah, no, excellent. Love this. So yeah, I started out, I grew up pretty poor, honestly. And in the Midwest, my dad was an engineer, and then did some real estate stuff, but really on a very small level. And then I got into food, really young. I was 15, 16, started working at Bob's Big Boy, washing dishes, which was I loved actually earning money as a kid. And I remember buying a car. My parents had to help me out. And my early time goal was, gosh, I just don't want to be, dependent on them. And so I worked really hard, worked a lot of hours while I was going to school. And then I just kept moving up. I thought, well, maybe I want to try to, I remember when they said, hey, Steve, you want to make the hamburgers? And I thought that was a big deal, right? I was like, this is
promotion.
Great. They're going to trust me to make the burgers. This is great. And did that for about a half a year. And then I ended up moving to more full service. Eventually went to fine dining and worked in a very fine dining restaurant in Los Angeles. And as a GM, I was 18 years old,
Wow.
super young. And it was really finding some success. Working with people seemed to be my strength. And, of course, I was 18 years old running this fine dining restaurant, and it had a full bar. And I remember my employees saying, gosh, you're not even old enough to serve a drink, which was pretty true. But for some reason, the owners had said, well, you'd probably be pretty good at this. And then after that, I ended up going to work with Guy Fieri. And he was my direct supervisor for about 2 years, fine dining restaurant out of Southern California called Louise's Trattoria.
Wow.
And then I ended up going to the buffet and doing that for about 11 years as a district manager and, upper leadership. And then I realized, I'm pretty good at this. And of course you see the P&Ls and you go, gosh, I should probably work for myself. And then the other big thing was, and probably the biggest driver, to be honest with you, was being able to create create my own, if you will, oh gosh, I'm losing my train of thought, but create my own
Like a playbook or something.
Playbook and really create a company that is really good for good for employees and really focus, pull out all of the the drama and the red tape and say, how do I just create a company that is really focused on the guests, really focused on employees and how I can develop them out and really provide some great opportunities for, for folks that
Hmm.
can do more than what they even believe. And
Yeah.
so that was really my driving force. And
Where
um,
did you where did you pick that up? At what point in time did you say, boy, guest experience really matters, caring for my employees really matters?
really, as I think that's what kind of made me successful along the way in the corporate world was I was
Mhm.
really good at that, like finding that new employee that had some leadership skills, was hungry, said, "Hey,
Mhm.
I want to learn." And I thought, wow, you know what? Let's get these guys going and give them some some leadership,
Yeah.
mentoring, and put them in positions that they didn't even think they could do.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
remember early on, one of the early on successes, I had this guy that was a baker, and he said, the bakery down the street wants to hire me for 50% more. And I said, you can do that, and you'll be a baker over there, but like what I can do here is get you into management, and I've already been developing you. You're not that far out. Just stick with me, and I'll show you there's a different path for you that's probably better suited. And I remember him passing up moving that to the other bakery, and he became a manager for me, an assistant manager. And then before, when I became a DM, district manager, he took my place and became the general manager. I remember calling him several years later, and his name was Frank. And I said, "Hey, Frank, how you doing?" He goes, "Gosh, Steve, you know what? So well." He goes, "I got married. I've got a kid. I've got two cars. I just bought a house." He goes, like, thank God I didn't go, to that other bakery, because I'd be making, 22 bucks an hour. And I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And he goes, and you know what? I love what I do. I have a great team underneath me. And it's just kind of fun to watch, him really grow and blossom. And I'm
nice.
just really proud of him.
Yeah. So it may be analogous to when somebody said, "Hey, Steve, you're only 18, but you're going to run this, fine dining restaurant."
Yeah, I thought they
But
were crazy. I said,
yeah,
these guys are nuts putting the keys in my hand. But, and it was one of those things where I was like, well, gosh, if they believe in me, I mean, I must be able to do it. And it really, really played out well.
yeah. So it's like if they believe in me, maybe I should believe in me.
Yes. And interestingly, I chose Jack in the Box, and for several reasons.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, as far as going out on my own, one of the reasons were they were they were refranchising, which made it pretty attractive and pretty easy to get into
So
because,
what does that mean, refranchising, just for our audience to get a sense of
sure,
businesses?
yeah. So when a company has company owned restaurants and they're looking to grow exponentially, a lot of times what they'll do is sell off restaurants to um, franchisees, and they'll say, "Hey, we'll sell you this many restaurants if you promise to open this many more." And it really works pretty well. They shift the risk to us, the franchisee, and then we also pick up. We're going to agree to develop out more locations, and for the franchisor, it's a really good deal. For the franchisee, it's also a pretty good opportunity because you don't have to build your way to scale. You essentially walk into scale immediately, and that was really attractive for me. So I went to work on the corporate side with Jack in the Box, and then there was an opportunity to purchase a group of locations, and ironically, they were the locations I managed. So I had left Jack in the Box to do that. At the time, they were not real keen on selling to employees because they kept losing all their employees to franchisees. And so I left and went to Arby's while I negotiated my deal with Jack in the Box to buy my restaurants. And it worked out great. It really worked out great. But I remember going to corporate, and they were interviewing me, and one of the VPs asked me a question, and she says, "Steve, what makes you believe that you can even do this? This is so much different than anything you've ever done. Why do you believe you'd even be successful?" And it was funny. I remembered thinking back to my time when I was 18, and I did, had very little confidence, and they were like, "Here's the keys to the restaurant. Congratulations. You're the GM." And I was like, "Holy mackerel." They believe more in me than I did. And I thought, gosh, it's funny you asked that. I said, you're a vice president, right? And they said, yeah. And I said, well, when you got promoted, I said, how did you know that you could do this job? I said, you weren't 100% sure, but you were pretty confident. I said, same thing. I will, one thing I do know, I'll work my tail off to make sure it's successful. I said, and remember, I'm putting my house on the line. So that's how confident I am that it will work. It has to work. And of course
I love it.
they approved me, and then I was off to the races. It was a lot of fun.
Wow. So that was your first Jack in the Box?
I bought 18 locations
18 out of the gate.
out of the gate. I got a partner. We bought 18 locations in Washington State, and then about 2 years later,
But
and it
hang
went
on,
so.
hang on,
Oh
hang
yeah,
on. You got 18 locations. Roughly what age were you?
I was about 42-ish.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah. So that was that would then so you've got a partner and then your next thing was I interrupted. Keep going.
Oh yeah, no. So he bought the 18 locations, and you got to picture this. Like we went from like 0 locations to 18, right? So like,
Yeah.
setting up the company, like how you got to get payroll in line, you got to figure out what's accounting look like, and how do I get the bills paid, and your toughest timeline is actually payroll, because you got to pay people, and it was a really short payroll. I think we had maybe 5 days in that payroll time period before we had to cut checks 6 days after that. And
Yeah.
I remember it being like, holy man, we got to get this like set up like yesterday, because I got to pay people. But it was a lot of fun. And then once that got set, then we could focus on operations. And the first year and a half was so successful that it gave us the means and the ability to expand out and do our next acquisition, which was another 26 locations, also in Washington State,
Of the same brand.
of the same brand. Yep.
Wow.
and
Okay.
then and then that transition went super well. And it was kind of fun. We had a few uh key employees that, when we purchased the first 18. I remember one of the GMs for the restaurant was she was a GM at the time. She had some new twins, and took a little bit of time off, but was still working for us, but took some time off. And then we acquired the second 26 locations, and we made her the training manager. And she was super excited about that. Really worked out well for her and her family, because she had some new kids, new young ones. And then eventually she became my HR manager, and then got promoted to basically, it's still an HR manager, but we helped her go to school and get her accreditations, and now she's an SPHR, which is um, it's a professional designation for human resources. I'm really proud of her. She's really moved up and done a great job.
So what did you see in her as a potential training manager?
When we purchased the locations, her restaurant, and it was absolutely dialed. I mean, and from a structure standpoint, you walked into a restaurant, like, guests were being taken care of. The restaurant was immaculately clean. um she was on her game. Like, people, we sat down to interview her, and I remember her like going, oh, give me a second, hang on. And she's like, hey, I need you to go on break, I need you to do this, you move over here, like reallocating the floor, and really directing the team. And I was like, you know that is like impressive. Like, the restaurant was just, when you walk, like, there's times you walk into a restaurant and you can just feel it. Like, this restaurant is absolutely humming. And that's where she was at. So she was kind of the obvious choice. And when I thought, who better to have as a training manager than someone that has systems and can really say, hey, and real experience. Like, she knows how to run one of these restaurants, not from a theoretical standpoint, but like from a boots on the ground. um she's done it. This is going to be a natural fit, and it really was. It really was. she's super fair and did a great job with that.
Hmm. Wow. 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 All right. And so you've got a knack for talent identification. You've got a knack for believing in yourself, but also I think surrounding yourself with uh, probably people that fill the gaps that you have, right, in your own, whether it's
Totally.
your own style.
That's exactly right. I believe in I'm not the best at everything, and I recognize that, know that. I feel like I'm pretty strong in many areas. One of the things that I've found a lot of success in is building the teams around me to hide any weaknesses, or maybe things that I'm just not the greatest at. I'll find someone that is really good at that, and I'll put them in place. And it really it, it, from a team standpoint, it really works well for me.
Fascinating. All right. Then let's talk about the due diligence part of your business as you grow. I mean, obviously you know what the Jack in the Box formula is. You know what's succeeding. How do you translate that into another brand? Because now you've got how many? I mean, what was your next one after this?
So right after that was we bought the entire San Diego Arby's market. We purchased 14 locations, and ironically, it was just months after doing the 26 um, Jack in the Box locations.
Wow.
Just a few months after that, we purchased all of the San Diego Arby's. Um, yeah, so part of the due diligence, we learned that that corporate was refranchising them, very similar to the Jack in the Boxes. But this time, this was a little bit different, a lot more complex from a standpoint of, we had a lot of short leases, trying to really, like, when you talk about due diligence and really digging in and going, boy, we had restaurants that 3 years after that, and they had been Arby's for like decades, but that we were going to be losing the leases, and trying to analyze those and go, well, you know, what's a fair price and how do you make that work with only 3 years left? Um, and then all of them needed to be remodeled. But yeah, so we went and visited every single location. My partner and I flew in. We spent a week traveling through, the locations and really digging in. And then as we did finish that, we went through, we analyzed all the leases, the time remaining, and put it together a really good deal. And of course, I'll also agreed to do some remodels, to open some locations. And Arby's, which is now Inspire Brands, really were great partners. These guys, they really helped us a lot. We purchased that market, and immediately we were up double digits. I mean, it was very, very impressive.
What do you
One,
attest that? What do you attest that to?
yeah, we had a district manager at the time that was just really just needed to kind of be given the freedom to operate, right? Like, just like give her the reins and let her do her thing. And she was already the district manager, but I think there was maybe uh she was put too tight of a box. And
Mm.
so when we purchased those locations, we put her in charge. She continued to run them, but then kind of took the reins off of her and said, "Hey, man, like, this is your baby. Like, go do it." And she absolutely blossomed. One of the things that she had developed out the team. A lot of them were really long standing employees and general managers, but she took them to a whole nother level, and sales immediately responded. And so as we continued to grow, we ended up making her a partner. After a couple of years, made her a partner in that business, and she has just done an incredible job. She currently is overseeing all 62 locations.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm really proud of her. Her name's Rosa, just absolute rock star. And
Wow.
I remember we did many acquisitions. Arby's has been around since the late 60s, as far as franchising. Um, and I remember her as we acquired more and more groups. One of the things that I remember there was one acquisition in Seattle. There were eight Arby's that we purchased, and whenever we do these transitions, I would be the person who would kind of help with it, get up on stage, explain to the new group, like, hey, you know what, life's going to be good, you're all going to have jobs, all the things that they're worried about, right? And this is who we are, this is our background, and then let them ask questions and answer as much as I can. We did the Seattle acquisition, and I remember we're just about to go in the room, and she goes, hey, Steve, this is my gig now. Do you mind if I lead this? And I said, wow, absolutely. Like, it's your baby, do it. And so she went up on and did the transition. She had seen it a couple times, but she did a great job. I was like, wow, I'm so proud of her. I just sat back and watched her do the magic, and it was just really fun. It really warmed my heart. Like that she deserves it. She's a rock star and doing really, really well.
Nice. You've had just a remarkable journey, and I'm sure that there's people along the way. I mean, you've called them out here that have helped you grow. What's the best advice you've heard, that whether it's personal or professional, that you take with you every day?
I think there's another franchisee that has this as his mantra on the bottom of his signature line, and it says that there's no elevator to the top. And it's funny because when I first read that, I was like, that's an interesting one. There's no elevator to the top, you need to take the stairs. And I think that's really true. Like, I've heard people go, boy, you got lucky. Maybe there's a little luck involved, but I'll tell you, there's a lot of hard work. You look at some of these large franchisees, you could say, okay, they may have been in the right place at the right time. There's a little bit of that, but there's a lot of also hard work, and grinding it out. And you know, I think if I was to talk to young people, or as I speak to young people, it's like, look, you know what? It's not going to be easy. You're going to have to grind it out and work really, really, really hard. Probably harder than people know or see. But if you're resolute and you say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn as much as I can. It just makes you so much stronger. When you do get up there, you're just in a much different position because you've done it. You've done it from, all the way from washing dishes to, managing a group of people to, now running a large organization. That would be my advice to young people. And that is my advice to my young employees
Yeah.
as I'm talking to like new team leaders and whatnot.
There's no elevator to the top. You've got to take the stairs.
You got to take the stairs.
Yeah. So, do you attribute success to failures along the way?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could say that I bat 1,000. I think I make a lot of mistakes, throughout every day, and certainly every month. But I think, as you recognize it, you fix it like immediately, and then you try not to make the same mistake twice. And I think that's been really one of my big pieces is and not just my mistakes. Like always watching others and go, they did that and it didn't really work out well. I make sure that I don't necessarily need to make the mistake personally. I can watch others, as they have the successes and the failures, right? I think I learn more from the failures than the successes, but um, yeah, I think, man, just don't make the same mistake twice and correct it. Like, how do you course correct and make sure that that just never happens? And I really spent a lot of time on that. I'll dig into that and reflect on it for quite some time because these mistakes, as you get bigger, they get very, very expensive. You don't want to have to do that.
Wow. Yeah, you either win or you learn.
That's
It's
right.
not a win-lose proposition. So, and if you don't learn, then you'll end up making those same mistakes over and over. So that's
That's right.
yeah. Wow.
And
Uh,
and they affect your team's lives because like I look at this is a privilege, right? It really is a privilege to lead a large team, And, I feel compelled, and really it's my duty. I always say, a lot of people say, well, you have a lot of people working for you. And I'm like, well, I kind of look at that a little differently. I feel like I work for a lot of people. If I can block and tackle well for them and they do their job well, we're all going to be successful together. So, but I'm responsible.
That is a wonderful ethos that you have. Not very many people would share that sentiment. It's like, they'd brag about the number of employees and, the fact that you can travel and you do all these things, but the fact that you say that you work for them.
Yeah, it is a different mantra. And I remind my managers, my district managers all the time, like, you're here because of them. Like there's those that serve the people and those that serve the people. And I said, don't forget about like your front line. That is you. Like those are the guys bringing in the money. The rest of us, we just cost the company money, right? We're an expense line. Those guys are the ones actually doing the magic. And I think it's really important never to forget that.
Yeah. Wow. There's some absolute gems in here, Steve. So thank you for sharing that. Let's talk about some of the let's say failures, but things that have cost you a mistake that may have been made. You want to touch on any examples, with regards to real estate or acquisitions
Sure.
or M&A? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple. One of them was I had seen another brand that had made I, it was early on in my career, so probably in my career as far as after the acquisition of the Jack in the Boxes, the 18 Jack in the Boxes, I had recognized that, like, for example, I-9s were a big problem, and I thought, you know what, I need to figure out how to make sure that those things are bulletproof, because there was another company that I knew of that got hit with I-9 violations, and they were staggering. The penalties were massive, and I thought, boy, I don't want that to happen to me. So I remember going out and talking to people. I'm like, there's got to be a way to automate this, and I went out and found a company that does paperless onboarding. And what I loved about it was it literally bulletproof. And you can't even hire someone unless, like, every form's perfectly filled out, because it's digital. And I remember making that transition, and that was one of the best moves I made, because it really protected us as a company. I think the other thing, that was one big one. I think the other thing, and this was one where I kind of got stung by the bee first before I figured out how to put the bee suit on. But I had I thought, you try to control expenses as a franchisee, and and I thought, well, gosh, I could track leases and whatnot, so I would put them on a calendar that I put with my admin. My admin had missed a an alert, like one of her calendar reminders that, hey, this lease is coming up. And I remember it was a really good restaurant, and we missed the window, and it wasn't the only one. This happened like 3 times before we could get onto Lease Cake, which, by the way, thank you very much for creating this product, because I'm sure if I would have had that from day one, we'd have 3 more locations. We just, it just was kind of a silly thing. But you miss those notices that, like, hey, I want to renew. They don't have to renew. And one of them just said, they just wouldn't even call us back. Hey, you missed your window. Sorry, you'll be out at, on this date. And I really could have used 5 more years, because it was a great location, and just kicked myself. But now obviously we're on the Lease Cake platform, and I don't have to worry about that. It's just been wonderful.
Well, I think thank you for that, but I think that, the having access and visibility to information. I mean, obviously, as a leader of a company, of several companies, several brands, you probably have, trusted, lieutenants and folks that are not just working for you, you're working for them. The dependency of information it's so vital today of any type, and speed truly matters, probably now more than anything.
Totally agree. And we delineate duties very, very well, because that's another critical piece. Like I want my people in the field working in the field. I do not want them having to track like when is this lease up, like or other things, right? Like I really wanted to make it so simple, and that's kind of what I was kind of talking about in the beginning of why did I become a franchisee. One of them is I can create the environment and the atmosphere that I believe is great, right? And eliminate all the red tape, um, and just cut to the chase. Like if we're doing something just to do something, we should change it. We should only be doing things that move the company forward and benefit the guests or the employees. And that's really what I tried to do. And then having them focus on, like I block and tackle for them so they can just put all their attention towards our guests and their employees.
Hmm. You definitely have a knack, and I would say you're probably one of the few that have self-actualized, Steve, in terms of like who you are and how you're wired. But what are, your key core values, if I could put you on the spot, like the things that you said, holy cow, I want to make certain that any new venture, big venture or otherwise, will always be forged by these three things or four things or five things. What would they be?
Yeah, excellent question. For me, honesty and integrity is everything, like everything. Um, Trust, honesty, and integrity. If you don't have those three things, like I think that from a value standpoint, you got to have that aligned, and it's really critical at the top. So like my directors, I mean, we spend a lot of time if we're going to bring someone from the outside, a lot of time to make sure that they're the right folks. Internally, we kind of know our people, so being able to choose the right person for that job, is a little bit easier than kind of a little bit of a gamble when you're bringing people in. But I'll tell you, that those are the three things that are, if you will, the red line in the sand. Where like if you don't have those three things locked up, I'd rather someone tell me, "Hey, Steve, you know what? I screwed up. I made a mistake. Here's what happened," and because we can work through that, right? But if you're hiding it, you're lying, you're not trustworthy, then I'm constantly questioning everything. And I'd rather be focused on, how do we improve the business, and not have to worry like, gosh, is that person telling me the truth, or is that really how what's happening? Like just be upfront and honest, and that those guiding principles have really taken us far.
Good deal. What advice would you impart on new people entering the business, franchise or otherwise, or younger generations that are wanting to figure out what they're made of and whatever venture they want to build?
Yeah, I tell you, I'd say, look at yourself and determine, what industry are you in, the right industry, right? Like for me, my dad was really deep into real estate in the 80s, and real estate back then was going bananas. And I remember him saying, "Hey, come work for me and we'll make good money." And I thought, I'm just good at people. I had realized by that point, I had just become a GM. Um, and I was pretty happy about, like, my success as a young guy. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to follow this path. Not that I didn't like real estate, I love it, but I thought, I'm gonna go after what I really am good at, what I like to do, and what I like to do is mentor and develop people. I'd say find your passion and then stick with it, and you know keep your mind open, because back when I first started, I stuck with restaurants versus real estate because I'm good at people. What I didn't know or think about was, did I ever imagine being a franchisee? I'd never even considered it until probably my late 30s, trying to figure out how do I go into business for myself, and how do I do my own gig versus just being staying in the corporate world. I just didn't want to, you know the political side of staying in the corporate world was not attractive to me, and this was a way to get out of that. So
Yeah.
I'd say find your passion, and follow it, and then be open. Like keep your eyes open, it may morph into something that you didn't really think you'd be doing, and but be open and be watching for it, and
Yeah.
good things can happen.
Yeah. Because not everybody is is in that position as a leader to say, I'm going to make a big bet on you. Like as an 18-year-old,
That's right.
sometimes you have to truly bet on yourself and push yourself. And
That's exactly right.
yeah.
That's exactly right. And
Well, so
there's risk in everything, right? You quit even if you're in the corporate world, you quit a job, you go to another corporate job. There's a risk.
yeah,
You gotta do some risk. There's gonna be some risk involved, but there's calculated risk, and then you'll know the time. For me, I wish I would have did it 20 years sooner, but I probably wasn't ready for it 20 years sooner. And I think, you look back and you go, the path I took was the right path, and I'm happy with where I'm at.
makes makes a ton of sense. All right, well, let's now talk about the future. What excites you about the future? Anything you want to share uh, based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, I'll tell you, fast food right now it is a bit of a tough time. But we'll always, business always ebbs and flows, and I think it does that with every sector, whether it's restaurants, real estate, you name it. There's always ebb and flows. I'm excited about the future from franchising in general. I just think that there's so much coming up, and so many things with AI, with technology. The business is really changing rapidly, and the opportunities are going to change rapidly. So I'm really excited to see where things kind of morph, and where we end up. The next 20 years is going to be a lot of fun. I'll tell you that much.
For sure. And I thought you were going to be talking about EVs because I was in Phoenix and I was in a Waymo way back. And then I was in Austin. I think I was in a Waymo. Couple of weeks ago, I was in Atlanta in a Waymo. I'm like, holy cow, you talk about AI. That
Totally
you're
incredible, right?
talking about what's that? It's crazy. Yeah. Driverless vehicles, electric vehicles. We could
It's funny. I'm foraging into the EV space currently with a group, where a franchise group, and I'm buying part of the franchisor, and then also be their first franchisee. But it's a really exciting space. There's so much happening. It's a lot of fun, and I have a Tesla, so it's kind of, you see how that autopilot works, and it's just game changer. It's unbelievable.
No doubt. Well, we can save this for another podcast. We could go on and on talking about the state of technology and EV for sure. So let's call it a wrap. That's today's very big venture. Thanks a lot, Steve. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Taj. Appreciate the time, and yeah, anytime. I'd love to do this again.
Absolutely. Well, this is a reminder that scale doesn't come first, courage does. And if there's something in this story that stayed with you, pay attention to that because the world changes when someone decides to build. I'm Taj Adhav, and this is Very Big Ventures.
Thank you so much, Taj.